I'm Jeff Cowan with the Annenberg School for Communications and Journalism, our dean you'll meet in a minute, who's going to be moderating this session. And I'm also a member of Jim Steyer's board of Common Sense Media, and I've been one of the founding members. And one of the things that's amazing to realize is that over the 15 years since Common Sense Media started, how the media landscape has been totally transformed. At that time, it was about 3 television networks and a few records and a few movies. And all of a sudden, the world is completely different. And it's different in exciting ways, and it's different in some truly dangerous ways. And Common Sense, the Annenberg School, and Tristan, who you'll meet in a moment, have been working together on, I think, some of the most intractable and important issues that, that we'll be dealing with as a society for many years to come. So I just want to introduce the panel, and then they'll start. On the left is, your left, is a gentleman who you may know as a Stanford professor. You may know him as a person with the courage to write a book called Talking Back to Facebook. But you certainly know him as the founder of Common Sense Media and many other organizations. Please welcome James Steyer. And Tristan Harris has so many titles now of his own. I mean, he's got his own organization that he's running now. But because of his work as a Google design ethicist, and then the fact that he came out and talked about what we're going to be talking about tonight, he, of course, was on 60 Minutes. Many people who saw him there. He's somewhere between a whistleblower and a visionary, but he's also been called the conscience of the Silicon Valley. And most recently, Tristan, I saw an article in the, you may have seen this in the Toronto Globe and Mail, which calls you Saint Tristan. So you should all treat him with particular respect. But I have to treat with particular deference my boss, a former TV journalist, anchor, network host, who has written her own book about talking to children, and who for many years has been involved with Common Sense Media, been a professor at the Annenberg School, and is now the dean of the Annenberg School, Dean Willow Bay, who'll be moderating the panel.
Woo! Thank you, Jeff. And well, we're thrilled to see you all here, and this is really going to be a conversation. We're going to make sure we save plenty of time to engage with all of you. I don't know about you, but I cannot imagine a more important conversation or a more important, pivotal, seminal moment to be having this conversation about the role of technology in our lives and its profound impact in ways that are sweeping and global and ways that are deeply intimate and personal. Our world is being rewired, and we do not have a roadmap. But we do have Jim Steyer from Common Sense. So Jim, moderator is a little bit of a euphemism when I'm fortunate enough to share a panel with Jim. But Jim, I know that you want to start off by sharing some work you did with us.
I do, because I think at the end of the day, first of all, thank you very much, Willow. Thank you, Dr. Jeffrey Cowan over there. By the way, and to our friends at WME who hosted this evening,
yes.
Thank you guys for getting us here.
Bravo.
That's very nice of you. Thank you. So, if you're in our role, the simplest thing you can do with an audience is let kids talk about the issues. So that is the shameless move we're going to do to get you engaged in this, which is show you a video about what kids are dealing, your kids, my kids, Willow's kids, and Tristan's future kids are dealing with. So if we start with that, and then we'll have a great discussion. So.
I check my phone a lot.
More than I can count.
I check it usually when I wake up in the morning.
Before school.
During school.
A couple times each class.
At lunch.
After school.
Walking home.
While I'm doing homework.
I'm watching people's stories. Check Instagram. Going through my feed.
Watch videos. Playing a game.
Liking pictures.
I'm constantly checking my phone until I go to bed. I think it's a mixture of everything that's on social media that makes it so cool.
Stories or Bitmojis or gifts. Teens want to try out the new feature. They want to be on the cutting edge of the technology that's coming out.
So on Snapchat, there's like the Snap shows, there's Snapchat streaks.
In the morning, just send the streaks picture, and when I get home from school, send a streaks picture. And now it's like a habit to do when I get on my phone.
When I post things on social media, there's definitely a period where I'm checking who saw it.
How many views you get, and what people are liking on my stories, and what I should keep posting.
There is a lot of pressure to present a version of yourself that's close to perfect.
I almost never post a picture that hasn't been like touched up in any way on Instagram. I always check it. If it's not getting as many likes as my other pictures, I might delete it. I have binge watched, I think, multiple shows. I've watched about 10 to 12 episodes in a day.
The 15 seconds between each episode definitely makes you feel like you have this urgent choice you have to make.
Instead of having to wait for an episode to come out every week, Netflix as a whole makes it a lot easier to just consume so much media all at once in a row.
I'm still trying to decide, but it starts playing the next episode. I'm like, oh, it won't hurt. You find yourself like 2 hours later and you're still watching it and you have homework to get done.
I watch a lot of YouTube, probably more than Netflix, and the suggested videos help me like subscribe to new people.
I will watch videos for like an hour and a half without even having a plan to do that.
There's just so much content that's just addicting.
I absolutely think that there is an addictive quality to video games.
The longest I've ever spent playing a game is 4 hours.
12 hours straight.
It's really fun to play it.
Sometimes I'll just keep going if I really want to level up in a video game.
When I do my homework, my phone is normally next to me, and I definitely do check it, and sometimes I get sidetracked.
If I'm doing my homework on my laptop, I might be, intermittently checking my phone. Sometimes if I just get too bored of my homework, I might play like Candy Crush or something.
I feel like I'm distracted a lot. I procrastinate a lot when I sit down and be like, okay, I'm gonna finish this, and then 5 minutes later, I'm just like playing video games, and I don't even know how that happened.
I would say that I'm definitely hooked on my phone. I feel that I'm very aware of this and I'm not very happy about it.
The most I've gone without my phone is about half a day. And it felt really, really stressful.
I feel like I have like kind of like a hole in me when I don't have like my phone on me. I get like stressed out like, oh, I'm probably missing this big thing.
Some of the pressures that I have as far as social media go is that I want to be able to keep up with everybody and where they're at and how many followers and likes they get.
I have definitely had times where I've just been frustrated and just deleted apps off my phone.
I went to a summer sleepaway camp for a month, and it actually felt pretty good being away from my phone. But as soon as I got back and saw everybody using their phone, I was like, well, now I should just get back on my phone.
I have definitely been emotionally affected by social media, maybe even depressed, but it's hard to say which causes what sometimes.
I sometimes wish that it wasn't a thing so I could just hang out with my friends and play basketball or do other things like that.
Wow, thank you, Jim.
Yeah. Thank you to the video team at Common Sense.
Yeah, bravo. I'm just going to push you a little bit. You've been doing this for a long time,
Correct.
right? You've been studying media and its impact on kids for a long time.
Right.
The Other Parent was the other book that you wrote before you wrote Talking Back to Facebook. But so, why is this moment different?
Well, Willow, it's a great question, and I actually think about it as a parent too, as I know you do too. This is a seminal moment, guys. There's no question. We have had this extraordinary change in our society over the last 10 or 15 years, I think, where technology, many times in very good ways, has changed society at warp speed, changed our lives, changed parenting, changed our interactions with ourselves, our friends, our work colleagues. our kids totally as a father of 4. And quite honestly, with a few exceptions, and I do think, yes, Common Sense tried to raise a lot of questions about this over the last 10 or 15 years. It's quite interesting. It just happened, and there was no leadership from the top, not necessarily from industry, but no leadership from the government, no leadership, sort of what's the impact on society. And we're at this point now where people realize that this device has an unbelievable impact on their own life, their relationships with their kids, et cetera. And when I wrote Talking Back to Facebook, I wrote it takes a year, after you write a book to get it published. So I wrote it 7 years ago. And it was really about how, it's not a very good book, by the way. It's just the overview of how media, and really digital media and social media are affecting the social, emotional, and cognitive development of children, like girls photoshopping their image all the time on Facebook. And there is a moment now, because of, I think, the Russian hacking, because of the stuff that Tristan and some of the inside whistleblowers have done, and also because all of us are going, really, do we want to be slaves to this device? That is a unique moment, and I think we're about to have a major reset here in the United States and globally about how we approach all of this.
Because it's clear that this is a global
And there's
phenomenon.
no question this is a moment. And it's up to, a lot of it's up to us to how we're going to frame the moment, but this is a unique moment in time. I mean, don't you agree?
Let me
Tristan?
ask you the same
completely.
question. You were obsessed with video games as a kid and survived to tell the tale. So why is this different?
Yeah, well, first I just want to say, I mean, it's so hard watching that video. I'm sure all of you feel the same way. It's hard for me because I know how we got here. I know how those design decisions get made. My friend in college, Mike Krieger, started Instagram. And I was even at an event, I'm just flashing back at in this moment, just in real time, when he came to this party and he just biked over. He was, we never saw him. He was working really hard every night. And he had just invented this feature. And the feature was when you double tap with your thumb and it likes a photo just by double tapping with your thumb. And what that did is it meant that you could keep scrolling and you could double tap and then keep scrolling without even moving your hand from its resting position. And he just said, like, oh, isn't this cool? Like it's neat that you have this little heart and it kind of expanded out like that as this animation. And, I just, it's so hard seeing this, to be honest with you. I mean, I spent all of my time on this and I can't stop being passionate about it because it affects everybody at even a subtler level than the stuff that this video gets at. It's totally transforming and kind of hijacking the deepest evolutionary instincts, which is why the good news is everybody is on the same team once you understand how this works, that we don't want to live in this world. This is like dystopia, hitting the accelerator towards this world. And the good news is we can actually change it. And the stuff that we've done in the last year, if you said a year ago from 60 Minutes that 1 year later, so first of all, a year ago, no one was talking about this. I mean, we were in niche areas.
I agree.
But a year later, Zuckerberg is testifying in Congress. We're talking about regulating social media, international front page of newspapers every single day. So if this feels like how are we ever going to change this, I just want to give you hope that I would have never predicted that a year ago, 60 Minutes is exactly a year and a week ago, that we would have been here today.
So back up a little bit and share with this audience sort of how you came to this place. And I think, first of all, tell us what a design ethicist is and what insight that gives you into the technology, into the AI, behind the technology, just as a base, just set a base for us.
Totally, yeah, and let's also include the what's different this time, because it's critical. People always say we always worry about 1970s kids gossiping on the telephone. We're just worried again today. Oh,
remember that thing called TV that people used to watch? That we were all riled up.
Okay, so quick setting the stage. So when I was a kid, I was a magician, and what that teaches you as a magician is really how to see the world in a totally different way. Because you look at a human mind, you look at every single human person, and you realize that there's these universal vulnerabilities. So think about that. So magic, it doesn't matter what language the audience member is. It doesn't matter whether they have a PhD. It's all about the fact that their mind has these evolutionary instincts, and magicians were kind of like the first psychologists without having an official field. They just knew how to exploit that system. Short-term memory is only a certain number. Attention works like this. If you emphasize choices in a menu architecture, you can get people to choose the third choice every single time. You know, there's all these different rules that all minds work the same way. So I had that background as a kid. Then I was at Stanford and I was a computer science major. I have a background as a tech entrepreneur, so I've started a tech company. I know kind of how the system works. But when I was in college, there was a lab at Stanford I studied at called the Persuasive Technology Lab. And it basically married together the field of psychology of persuasion with the field of technology. In other words, how could you make this device persuade people to do things? Could you shift with technology people's attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors to get them to do different things? And this was thought of as an optimistic field, that we could get people to go to the gym, we could get people to floss, and you would put your goals in, and technology would be on your team to persuade you to do good things. And then at the end of that class, and so in that class, my you know, later very good friend, Mike Krieger, the founder of Instagram, was in that class with me. You know, we read books on Edward Bernays and Robert Cialdini's influence and clicker training for dogs and the whole field, really, and how casinos work and how they, you know, shape choice architectures. And so the final class was about the ethics, about the future of persuasive technology and about the ethics of persuasive technology. And one group came up with this idea. They said, what if in the future you had a digital profile of every person and you knew exactly what uniquely persuaded that mind? So with this person, I could say the New York Times thought this was the best book, and that would persuade you. But for this other person, I have to say your best friend Susan thought that was the best book, and that would persuade you more. And you could actually leverage the unique, vulnerable psychological characteristics per mind to get them to feel or be persuaded to do anything. That, by the way, is exactly what Cambridge Analytica is. So that was in 2006. And I remember seeing that in 2006, and I was very concerned about that. But it kind of went into the background. But it became kind of a way that I saw the world from then forward. And I saw all of my friends, you know, we were all, I'm the same age as Zuckerberg. Mike Krieger's a year younger from Instagram. I saw all of my friends who were building tech companies get roped into how do we basically keep people hooked? How do you keep people engaged? And more and more of the design decisions were about how do you play a trick on the human mind to keep people scrolling. So one simple example, just to make it concrete. Slot machine variable schedule rewards. If you make someone pull a lever and sometimes they get a reward, and you pull a lever and sometimes you don't, that makes it addictive. And so what do? When you open up your phone, you pull to refresh to see if you got some new tweets. You have the blue dot that says you do have some tweets that are marked at you, and sometimes you do have the blue dot, sometimes you don't have the blue dot. When you turn your phone over, sometimes you do have a notification from that exciting person, sometimes you don't. And so all these things wrap up into your phone acts like a slot machine, and you're playing it every single moment. You have a slot machine in your pocket. There's another strategy called bottomless bowls. So they did this study where if you had 6 people sitting down at a table with 6 different soup bowls, and you have 2 of the bowls are actually wired with a tube that actually auto-refills the soup as people are eating. And the question would be, would those people know and stop eating? And the answer is that people who had the bottomless bowls, the auto-refilling bowls, consumed 76% more soup, and they didn't really know that it was even doing that. And so why am I mentioning this? Because all these news feeds, they figured out, hey, instead of giving people stopping cues, when I'm down to the bottom of this water, there's a natural stopping cue. Evolution gives us an instinct that says when we see that there's a moment to stop, we pause, we reconsider, and we ask what do we want to do next. So if you're a designer, you're trying to keep people hooked, you want to remove those stopping cues. So YouTube says, let's autoplay the video on that 15-second countdown, so like there's no stopping cue. Don't you want to just keep going down the rabbit hole? And Instagram says, let's just keep refilling the bottom of that bowl so you can just keep scrolling forever. So there's hundreds of these techniques, and this is a massive problem. We don't have any ethics for how do you ethically manipulate human animals.
And this is this combination of, yeah, go ahead, that. It is a combination of device and media.
Yeah.
So walk us through some of the ways in which, not just Facebook, some of the ways in which social media are addictive and compel or rewire, particularly in terms of kids and teens, their relationship to the world around them.
Yeah. Well, so, and that's related, I think, to the second point, which is why is it different this time, and how does social media, the social component, make it different? So it's one thing if I can rearrange choices on a menu and get you to pick the thing I want more by putting the one I want you to pick at the top. That's just behavior. That's just choice architecture. That's just putting the thing I want you to pick at the top. But with social media, I can manipulate your social psychology. So if I send you that message that says you've been tagged in a photo, specifically your friend who you like tagged you in a photo, and of course I'm not going to tell you which photo it is. I need to have you have that see photo button, right? And so you think that your friend Jim tagged you in a photo, and so you need to know right now, because it's tapping into vanity, social approval, belonging, all of those instincts are getting activated, so you have to know now. And you think that Jim made this conscious choice, you have to get back to Jim, right? That's how we see that moment, right? Okay, so what actually happened? Facebook is sitting here. They're saying that there's this user called Tristan, me. I'm dormant for a while. I don't use the product for a week, right? So it's trying to figure out, how am I going to get Tristan to use this product? I know he's got this friend named Jim. Jim's looking at this photo of Tristan. Why don't I suggest to Jim, don't you want to tag Tristan in this photo? Wow. So and it suggests, it has my face, it knows what my face looks like, so it suggests to Jim, hey, don't you want it, yes or no, do you want to quickly, we'll make it easy, one click. Don't even have to type it in, right? Make that the top of the choice menu for him. Now I'm tagged in thinking that I owe him a response, and it's like they're this puppet master that's taking 2 billion human animals, like chickens with their heads cut off, just like answering each other. So now if you say, hey, we're addicted to lots of things, tobacco, alcohol, sugar, there's nothing new here. There's absolutely nothing to worry about. It misses the fact that there's basically thousands of engineers on the other side of the screen who know how to play these social tricks on human beings, and you have children especially who are the most vulnerable. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You know, social validation works on all of us. We all love the feeling of those likes. Everyone in this room has experienced that, I'm sure. But for children, that's like you get 2x the payoff, just like with sugar.
And I mean, Jim, you have incredibly compelling data that 72% of teens say that they need to respond immediately. Immediately. Now, I don't know off the top of my head what that number is for their parents.
Less. It's
less?
lower.
Okay.
It is. Actually, it is lower, but it's still absurd. But it's way lower because we were not born, we were not raised that way. But it's true. And what's very interesting for us, so other than it's great to be up here with Stanford and USC at the same event. And I will acknowledge that USC Annenberg is the finest communication school in the United States. I will.
Thank you, Jim.
I will.
Thank you, Jim.
And even Tristan will say that. But BJ Fogg's class, I remember going to BJ Fogg, his professor, because
BJ runs the Stanford Persuasive
Right, and I've been a prof at Stanford for many years, having nothing to do with this topic area, and going, what are you doing? Because Facebook was paying him, right? Because they were understanding the psychology of this. And again, I'm not even passing a moral judgment on it. But what's fascinating is it is marrying the best arts of psychology with this massive AI, if you will, machine-driven, dopamine-driven behavior. And for somebody who's a Luddite like me, and I actually think, well, sort of older generations, that is why it's not like TV. It's not like when our parents were worried about bad rock and roll lyrics or whatever. It's different because there are these guys behind the screen, and it's intentional. And it's why I thought Jeff Cowan's description of Tristan as both a whistleblower and visionary is really important. Because at some point, for the mass of us who are not Stanford EE majors who get hired at Facebook or Instagram or, how old's Evan now? 27, but I remember him as a Stanford student. We don't understand that with the power of these technologies, you can radically change human behavior for good and not for so good. And you can play on all the instincts that have been there since time immemorial.
Well, and to get to your question at the end of it, which is how is this affecting children at a deeper level?
Yeah.
So Jaron Lanier just gave a great TED Talk I recommend, and he talks
Jaron Lanier is very smart in general, because he's been talking about this for like 10 years.
Also been talking about it for a long time, but he was the father of VR at Microsoft. Anyway, I encourage you to check out the TED Talk. He refers to this problem as behavior modification, that we're able to, you check your phone, you either get a positive reward, so you do more of that thing, or negative rewards. You have 2 billion people jacked into the matrix, all checking their phones, they're getting positive and negative rewards, and you're changing their behavior. What this misses is you can actually go deeper down the brainstem. You can change belief modification. You can do identity modification. And with children, what I want to say is you can do self-worth modification.
Totally.
So you can, but let's back up 1 second, because when you hear this, you're probably thinking there's all these diabolical people who went to this Stanford lab who are just set up like, how do we get all these evil kids?
That would be BSc perhaps, but not Stanford.
So why are these people, why are these smart, good-hearted engineers and designers even doing this awful thing? Like, why is that awful stuff we just saw in this video happening? And it's because there's this race for attention. Well, specifically, there's money, but money we wired up. There's a lot of places to get money. You can have people pay you, but instead we didn't do that. How much have you paid recently for your Facebook account? How much have you paid for your Instagram account? How much have you paid for your Snapchat account? Right, so their customer is the advertiser, which means that they need you to basically, they have to get your attention. So they're caught in this race for attention. So let's say YouTube has that 30 minutes of your attention today. Even if they're kind people and they say, we actually don't want to be aggressive and grow. We don't want to grow that 30 minutes. We just want to keep that 30 minutes. But to keep that 30 minutes, it's going to get more and more competitive. Because we need more and more things wanting your attention. So it's not enough that you use YouTube. I have to crawl deeper down the brainstem and addict you to it, right? So one way of changing people's behavior is to do behavior modification. But better than that is you go all the way down into the identity layer. So now my self-worth is tied to the number of likes that I have. So now I don't actually have to be altering your behavior. I've actually changed how you see yourself. Your identity has been privatized by the number of followers you have, the number of likes you have. And now that I've got you hooked on that, now you're walking around the world and all the independent decisions you make are still backed up, hijacked by this identity.
And you know, Willow, I remember writing, I'm a complete Luddite, so I was writing, talking back to Facebook. By the way, this guy, Jaron Lanier, a really smart guy, Sherry Turkle at MIT had written a book called Alone Together 7 or 8 years ago that you should all read. It's a brilliant book, actually, because it made me understand it. But I actually thought of it basically in terms of my 2 good daughters. That basically what got me really interested in this was having 2 smart kids who were both concerned about how they looked, right, and their body image. And they would go on, and I had a kid, there was a kid, a Brown graduate who had come to work at Common Sense who'd done her honors thesis about body image, eating disorders, and Facebook. Like, I don't know, 2010 she wrote it. And it was interviewing like 50 kids in her class at Princeton and Brown and all these other high elite colleges, right? And them talking about how they constantly Photoshop their image, and it was about self-worth. And you realized that that was what got me into this, was really as a dad, that your kids were forming their identities on a different platform. And with all the ways that we have, and all looking for the same social cues that we all look for in various parts of the relationship, but you were doing it on an anonymous platform where people could manipulate what it was, but they were playing to the same insecurities we all have, the same issues that adolescents have when you're trying to figure out who you are and what you look like and how you're going to be popular. And then realizing that a couple of social media platforms had basically come to dominate the way that people, young people in particular, formed their sense of self-worth and identity. Not exclusively, but with an outsized impact on their lives. That's a very big deal. This is way before we started looking at the impact on our democratic institutions and how our elections work. But they're all part of the same big picture. Yeah.
So I want to get to sort of forward-looking and solutions, but Tristan, we've gotten a sense of the whistleblower, Tristan. Let's talk a little bit about the visionary Tristan and how you might imagine a world in which technology was designed, as you put it, more humanely.
Yeah. So it's super important to shift gears because we just want to establish first just how serious the problem is, and so it's really important to have that step first. A few months ago, we started this thing called the Center for Humane Technology, which is a nonprofit basically saying we can do this a different way. The whole point is, sorry to take your phone, Jim.
That's you happy thing.
Is it possible for 2 billion people to have a rectangle in their pocket and we can have a different relationship to it, where it helps us make different choices? So I see this as, and this was my job at Google. So design ethicists, what does that mean? How do you ethically manipulate 2 billion people's thoughts? So let's say you have a 2 billion person ant colony called humanity. And this is just humans just going about doing what they're doing, okay? And Google has this sort of super eye view of like 2 billion, okay? Now, you take that 2 billion person ant colony and you hand them, each of them, one of these. Well, you're going to see that 2 billion person ant colony make very different choices. You've just sort of made the whole ant colony go crazy. They're all like sitting there by themselves, lonely. They're like not sleeping. They're checking to see their identity, their self-worth. So the question, though, is what would it mean to put this in the hand of 2 billion humans and teenagers and everything else and actually have the outcome that we want? So I see this as like a GPS for life choices, right? So you put this in your hands. And if you put a bicycle in your hands, you don't worry about bicycles sort of tearing apart the fabric of society and Russian manipulators making bicycles go crazy, and right? So why do we not worry about that? Bicycles as a technology are ergonomically, not just to the muscles, but they're ergonomically designed to like free choice making. They're empowering you to go new places, new frontiers. You're still in control of the goals. As you're riding, you're thinking about what you want. It's empowering you to get to those goals, and it's using you to get those goals. You're activating it. This does not work that way, right? But the premise is, and this is what Steve Jobs used to talk about in the 1980s, that we want a bicycle for our minds. That's what a computer was supposed to be about. That you can have thoughts you would have never had. You can make choices. You can do creative, expressive, interactive, cool, empowering new things you could have never done. So when we think about how to solve it, humane design and humane business models are about first understanding that a human being can be manipulated. Take a magician's view of a human being, take an evolutionary biologist's view of a human being. We're always vulnerable or weak to social approval, social validation, slot machine rewards, bottomless bowls. We're vulnerable to all those things. So instead of exploiting them, we actually protect them. We give people an exoskeleton that protects those human instincts, and we empower you like a bicycle to use those instincts in a way that it feels empowering, that's holding you in control, that asks you what your goals are and helps you make the choices you want. So if this thing is currently sort of a GPS for life, and it's laying down blocks of uses of time in the timeline of your life, right now all those blocks of time are people spending more time blocks on screens. All those time blocks it's scheduling into your life are like, I'm just going to do this for more and more and more and more. So instead, if this was humane, it would be asking us, or sort of in conversation with our values and our goals of our society, and then helping us schedule those blocks of time. I don't mean schedule like a calendar. I mean it's enacting uses of time and causing us to go to the places that make a society thrive, which means not just by yourself, by a screen, never talking to anybody, auto-playing videos, keeping people hooked. So hopefully that some kind of overview of.
All right, sign me up. How do we get there? But in all seriousness, how do we get there? So you two are the Avengers. Like, who's on your team? So working, do we work within the industry to fix it? You know, do we?
All the above. Here's what I would say. The way we've tried to look at it, and actually we did, when we launched this campaign, we put out sort of like the basics. This was when we started this in February. And it's after my good friend from high school, Roger, brought Tristan to our office about 9 months ago. And we were like, these guys, they could use a little help starting an organization and naming it well, but then taking what they do uniquely. So I think we looked at it in 4 or 5 different ways. Okay, first of all, this is ultimately about a cultural shift. That's the biggest thing I would say to you. And that's why, by the way, why this community, meaning the media and entertainment community, matters. This is about a cultural shift. It really is. And
we actually use the phrase cultural awakening.
No question, no question. And by the way, even enlightened politicians understand that. It's not really, because I'm going to talk about them in a second, but this is about a cultural shift. It's about the balanced, effective, humane use of technology, which is here to stay. The genie is out of the ball in our life. But so number one is sort of ongoing long-term public awareness, public education, right? And that's really critical. It's why we do multi-year ad campaigns, device-free dinner, device-free whatever. It's you're basically trying to shift behavior, just like you did with tobacco, just like you did with drinking and driving. Although these, I would say, are even broader, more important cultural issues, right? So one is broad public awareness. The second is, I think, our strategy at Common Sense is, because we have a distribution network into the great majority of schools in the United States, is actually go directly to kids and their parents and teachers that way with sort of basic education. And the best way, as the father of 4, to convince kids to do something is tell them they're being manipulated. Piss them off.
Absolutely.
By the way, they know much more than certainly Willow and I do about, he probably knows how to manipulate the phone better than most people, but Our kids are way smarter. But you have to educate. So the second thing, broad public awareness and cultural change. But that's accompanied by going directly at kids in an educational context. And I actually think this is part of the educational system of the 21st century because used wisely, those are surrounded by two very important commas there, technology can be an incredible educational learning tool, right? So you go broad public awareness, reaching kids from kindergarten on up, because you guys have been giving your iPads to your kids since they were 2. So they're using this technology, they're natives, how do you do it? I think the third thing is actually the industry, and I think there are 2 aspects to that. The first is what Tristan and his colleagues, who now are at our office in Common Sense, which is really great because they all come to work at 3 and work until midnight. We work from 9 to 5. Now you learn what the technology industry is really like. We tease them about that. But the truth is it's humane design. It's what these guys are brilliant at. It's how do you convince the people who work at the companies that this is, because they all want to do good. You never hear us demonize the people involved because we're not suggesting, and I think that would be a terrible error as we approach this as a society. But how do you do really great, humane things to use these devices, which are in our lives and will be in our lives, in a really humane, positive, disciplined, ethical, productive way? The other part, flip of the industry part, is you have to shame them, which is what we're pretty good at when we feel like it, which is calling people out and ask them, you're a parent too. You live in this society too. By the way, our democracy matters. Really, you're going to let your platform be used to manipulate an election? These questions have to be asked to people who have allowed their platforms to be used to manipulate our fundamental democratic institutions, which is exactly what happened in the United States in the last couple of years with at least a fair amount of knowledge of the people who ran the platforms. That is a very, very big deal in terms of ethical behavior. And people need to be called out and held accountable for that. And at my age, I think I feel comfortable doing that to people. So that's the industry third. The fourth is there is a need for regulation. I'm sorry. If you talk to your husband, if you talk to anybody who's in a regulated industry, they are pissed off that if you have a telecom company or a broadcast or cable media company, there are very clear regulations about what you can say, what you can't say, what's allowed during political speech, and many different things, net neutrality, et cetera. And there's this one sector of society, probably the most important dominant economic sector of society, the technology, that has no rules at all and has walked away scot-free, run by 25-year-olds from Stanford and SC who never thought about what the issues were. No, so you have, and if you look at it that way, you do the average consumer and a cultural change, students, the industry from both angles, and government playing the leadership role that government should play in a democratic society.
Okay, so give us a status report on that, because I know you've been spending a lot of time with policymakers. Is regulation inevitable? What's it going to look like? Where is it headed?
So here's the deal, overall. It is going to come. First of all, Europe has passed. So we've been talking about privacy at Common Sense for 7 or 8 years. And when I first was going to write that book, it was going to be about privacy. And then when you really look at social media and digital media, it's more about social emotional behavior than privacy. But privacy, if you would like to take my Poli-Sci 101 class at Stanford or Jeff Cowan's at SC, is a fundamental right under the US Constitution and also written into the California Constitution. So privacy is a very, very important concept in terms of how we live our lives. And it has been enshrined as a fundamental right, which there are 3 or 4 in our society. That has been eviscerated over 10 or 15 years. And there used to be comments, they no longer happen, from people in industry saying norms have changed, privacy is irrelevant. So that is no longer being said, by the way. But that was said up until 2 or 3 years ago. And so government has to put common sense privacy regulations in place. Europe's doing it. Washington is so dysfunctional right now that I think it is highly unlikely it will happen in Washington. No, I'm being very frank with you. And so our strategy is California. We live in California, the 6th biggest economy in the world. And we are going to be introducing within the next 2 weeks omnibus privacy legislation that I am very optimistic will pass, that will change the nature of how you relate to the platforms. It will be opt-in rather than opt-out. It will be you in control of your data, not them in control of your data. You are the product. You need to understand that when the customer is the business. So I think you're going to see omnibus privacy legislation here in California that will become the de facto standard for America because of Washington's dysfunctionality. And second, you're going to see at that federal level, I think, Amy Klobuchar, Mark Warner, John Kennedy, the Republican from Louisiana, transparency in election stuff, because our election was deeply impacted by bad actors in 2016. Whatever your political viewpoint, that happened. That should not happen. So there is going to be a change in the way that social media platforms in particular are allowed to have an impact on elections. And that will be largely about transparency, I would imagine. And so that's two really big changes.
So Tristan, when you, if asked or called upon to advise the policymakers at the most effective policy strategies for helping to fix this problem, where do you line up? What do you recommend?
Yeah, policy is still very, very tricky. And I'm looking further ahead at the kinds of things that are coming. I mean, the things that worry me are, there's a lot on fire right now. And so you have to look ahead and say, for example, one thing we talked about, and actually that Jim actually has been pushing in California, is the bots bill. So if you think about it, it's going to get harder and harder for a human being to distinguish between something that other human being is generating, or that they're interacting with a human being, versus they're interacting with a machine. So Russian bots are machines that look like humans. And if you don't know, it's going to be harder. I mean, the deepfake stuff, you're not familiar with deepfakes. Deepfakes are where you can basically simulate Obama saying things he didn't say. In fact, I just came from TED, and there's a new TED talk about you can take basically any celebrity's photo, and you can actually, from just photos, reconstruct a three-dimensional model of them saying anything you want them to say with basically 20 minutes of audio of their voice. So now you can sync the two together, and you can basically simulate, you can break down this instrument. So, and this is an opportunity to say, this is why this is a civilization scale challenge. All of us are stuck inside of a mind-body human meat suit that is not going to change. We're not going to get, our brain hardware is not going to get better at discerning reality. We're stuck in our own current ability to discern reality, which means that the humane technology approach is, how do you walk around in a human mind-body meat suit thing and have it still function in the world? That you don't get addicted to things, that you can actually discern the truth, that you have the relationships you want, that you're not just lonely by the screen. So all of that is about respecting and honoring the way that being human works. And so the bot bill, sorry to bring it back to the practical.
We call it the Blade Runner bill.
Blade Runner bill, because the idea is in Blade Runner, how do you tell if someone's a machine or a robot? We need to be able to disclose any machine-generated content. So you probably, how many here have actually heard about the YouTube disturbing videos, that like these violent videos? I'm actually surprised there's not that many. Okay, so without going into too much detail, there's disturbing violent videos being uploaded to YouTube. The video starts off with familiar animated characters like Incredible Hulk and Spider-Man doing sing-along songs. And they sing songs, and then midway through the video, they pull out AK-47s and they start shooting things. And I'm saying this not because I'm saying, hey, there's some violent videos on YouTube. We always have violent videos. What's the big deal? These videos were generated by machines. So you can take from South Korea an animation kit of these like popular cartoon characters. You can take some popular songs, and you can take some popular models, and you just let the machine invent and generate new videos. And then you can upload them automatically. So you have automated content being uploaded automatically, being driven automatically by YouTube's algorithm saying, well, that seems to be getting a lot of clicks. Let's just keep feeding that thing. And you end up with, in this case, there was millions and millions and millions of videos. Millions of views of these videos, like hundreds of millions of views of these disturbing videos. So we need to be able to class out automated activity from human activity. Yeah. Because from a perspective of being human is not going to change, we're going to get better and better AI. If we want to protect against that, we have to actually have that. That's a real thing being pushed in California, and I think that's going to get closed more in the future.
Okay, now that we're really freaked out, before we go to audience questions, Jim referenced, and you did as well, what a year this has been, and how far we have come in a year in this moment of cultural reckoning. So what's the reason for optimism here?
To me, it's exactly that. I mean, I was terrified. I'm still terrified by how fast the curves are going, which is why I think we have an urgent challenge. It's like climate change, except we have to spin it really fast. We have to turn around immediately. And the thing that keeps me optimistic is, and this is a check-in just as recently as a couple weeks ago. I mean, it was a year anniversary of the 60 Minutes thing. And I can tell you, when I did that interview with Anderson Cooper, I mean, no one was talking about any of this. Any of this. And I'm not taking credit for what happened after. I just mean that the sense of how much has happened in a year is unbelievable. And I think you have to hold that perspective and say, it's because of people like you in this room and every room that knows about this and pushes this, that this is going to turn, because it has to. Because the good news is that no one actually wants to live in the world that we're headed towards. Like, if you can paint that picture for anybody, there's not a single human being who says, gosh, I'm so excited to live in a world where I can't tell what's true, or foreign actors can manipulate our elections, and my kids are stuck basically glued, with their self-worth privatized by 20-year-old designers, right? So like, no one wants that. That's the good news. We just have to actually show that that's where we're going, so everyone sees that we want to change course, including people who build these products.
And Will, I'm very optimistic right now. I mean, this is a huge shift. When I wrote Talking Back to Facebook, it came out 6 years ago. Glazed eyes, right? Except for parents around self-image and body image and issues that everybody knows are so important if you're a parent, right? But you just feel the cultural shift. And you feel it among young people. And they don't really want to be, if you look at the polling data, you referred to some of the other stuff we were talking about earlier, when you ask kids what they think about their phones or their behavior and social media, they're not happy about it. They feel they have to be there, but they don't want to. So you are seeing this major cultural shift. And remember,
it's already happened.
It is. And we're on the, if you think about, if it's a 100-yard dash, we're probably 10 yards in. So we have 90 yards to go. But it's really good. Because ultimately, we as a society will come to you want balance. You want healthy balance. And also, the other thing, you see the splintering of the tech industry. So it's not a monolithic industry, guys. So when I meet with Tim Cook or Eddie Q or the other people at Apple, we are here. We are totally behind GDPR, that is the European privacy regulations. We are willing to redesign. Don't let Tristan or anybody else tell Apple how to build a phone, by the way. But that would not be a good idea. That would be a very short meeting. Let them figure out how to do it. But they know the issues, and they're the best at creating stuff. And I think the other companies are thinking that. Look, you had Mark Zuckerberg on his 15th apology tour, but he got in front of Congress, guys, for 10 hours. There's a reason it wasn't him rather than the Deputy General Counsel who went 4 months ago. That's because things have shifted. But ultimately, I would tell you it's about our kids. Because I think it's kids knowing this is this great technology. We just do not want to live our life that way. And I feel that certainly as a parent, I don't know if you do, Willow, with your kids, there's a visceral sense that things are a little out of whack. And it's not like we want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. So I'm actually very optimistic that with the right kind of leadership and literally the action of people in this room, that things are going to change politically, at the industry level, and ultimately with individual behavior.
Do you all have questions? Yeah? Great. We're going to get a mic over to you. Let's start in the front, if we can. Get a mic down here. Thank you. And while we're getting the mic, Tristan, do you agree with Jim about that there is a cultural shift inside the tech industry right now?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of our strategies has also been, in terms of how do you change, people used to say to us back in, I've been working on this since 2013 actually, and people used to say, how are you going to change a business model that props up hundreds of billions of dollars of market value? I mean, how is that ever going to change? I mean, it seems so powerful. How could you ever possibly, and the thing that's actually the fastest changing lever is the morale of the employees themselves. Think about it. If you're Facebook and you've got these spooky governments who may or may not regulate you, and they're not so competent, and they hold you to Congress, but they don't ask good questions. So you think you got a free pass, and you think you're done, right? Yep. You think you're going to get away with this. But then you go back to work and you look at your employees. And your employees go home from work in San Francisco, and they show up at a bar in the Mission District, and they're having drinks with their friend, and they say, yeah, someone says, where do you work? And you say, Facebook, and they say. And everybody knows, we had to haul them to Congress to get the number that it was 126 million people who were affected by Russian propaganda, not the 1 million that they were claiming. And we got that to happen, by the way, right? So yeah, they don't tell the truth, and then you haul them to Congress, and then they tell the truth, and you do it again, and it changes it, right? And then you also, it changes the sentiment in the company. And we have many people who are leaving the companies and wanting to work more with us, frankly. And I think that turn is happening. So I do want to say that.
And by the way, I want to say something. I have not said this, but I've watched Tristan, and a friend of mine who my brother Tom and I went to high school with, Roger McNamee, who was the early investor in Facebook and Google. And
Roger was Zuckerberg's mentor.
And the kids who, I always call them that because they're a few years younger than me. who work with us now at the Center for Humane Technology. These guys have changed a ton. I am not kidding. A small group of people over the last 6 to 9 months, and Tristan being the rock star image of it, actually. But it's true. This is why Zuckerberg got up and testified in front of Congress, guys. Things have changed. Things have changed. And they are very aware that their employees are coming back and saying that. And Evan over at Snapchat down in Venice, and all the people who were there, and all the people. And that is a very, very big phenomenon. And a handful of people started it. And now when we see how many people, once they launched the organization, all these engineers, all these Stanford science nerds, you know, who took really high-paying jobs and thought their future, going, well, maybe it isn't that cool, or maybe I had to think about what the consequences of some of the stuff we're building is. That is a huge, huge change, and a handful of people launched that. He deserves a tremendous amount of credit for that.
Yep. Okay, now we're going to go to this gentleman over here.
Any system of regulation is going to get gamed, right? As soon as you say this is the rules, yeah, right. So, and I think the important thing is that's why we need the regulation to create the guardrails and to set the ideal, the framework, the way to think about it. I mean, here's the thing. I know for a fact that Twitter is working on a bunch of stuff around bots in advance of the bots bill, and maybe the bots bill may or may not pass. But the point is, by pushing all of that, you're getting them to do something. And it sounds kind of weird that it's this game of theater, it's this game of maneuvering and chess, and there's all this stuff that's happening. And anything's going to get gamed, but when you anchor on the ideal and you push it and you get public pressure for it and you say we're going to do it, it has an impact. So I'll say that. So I think anything's going to get gamed. How do you make sure that you set an ideal anchor and you keep the accountability up so when the design is not good, people say Facebook's playing these design tricks on getting people to opt in anyway, which by the way has already happened. That's something that's already getting called out for. So that's the first. The second question was about
humane. Give us an example of humane.
Oh yeah. Well, so and this is less about the good apps and the bad apps. I think this is about redesigning the whole thing in a way that's humane. So what's a good example of this? I mean, so a simple example that already exists is this thing called Flux. Do you guys know Flux? So Flux, so it turns out your eyes, evolutionarily speaking, have this feature where if you see blue light, so light with blue in it, has the blue spectrum inside of it, it actually screws with your, what is it called, your melatonin response that basically sets your circadian rhythms. So by all of these human animals staring at these bright screens, like late at night, which we've been doing for years and years and years, with blue light, we're actually screwing with our circadian rhythms. And we didn't even know that. But in the same way that we didn't know that we're feeding ourselves high fructose corn syrup or something like that. So what Flux does is they say, oh gosh, let's start by asking, how do human beings work? How does the biology work? And they said, okay, this blue light thing is causing a problem. What if we could do this thing where location dependent where your laptop is, we know when the sunset time is, and as you get near that sunset, we start gradually filtering out the blue light from the screen, which is why you may have seen some friends with screens that look a little bit yellow around bedtime. It's because they have Flux. And so that's kind of the model for starting by looking at how do human beings work and how do we design ergonomically to the biology, to the spiritual sort of identity level. How do you protect the self-authorship of human beings?
And you mentioned to me that there are some things that we can be giving us a sense of agency, as great as it is to turn to an app with a solution.
We should talk about that super briefly too.
Yeah, give us some tips.
Show them.
Yes. So one thing there's a bunch of things you can do right now. You don't have to wait for regulation and other things.
Just use my thing.
Do you have the?
He's a magician.
Oh yeah. Well, no, it's fine. So his screen is in grayscale. So why would you do that? Why would you hold your screen in grayscale?
I don't know how to do that, by the way, but I will learn.
Yeah. So depending on which, so you can go. The way you do this, and this is all on the website, by the way. If you go to humanetech.com/takecontrol, where you just see the Take Control link. You'll see some tips, and one of them is you can turn your phone from color to grayscale. This will work for certain kinds of people. The idea is not to do it all the time, but to basically leave it there as a default, so you still use color when you take photos and go to maps or things like that where you need the color. But what grayscale does is when you look at your phone, just to turn it over, and you see all those red dot icons, or you see all just the colorful icons, it's implicitly like lighting up and act like a sort of dopamine response in your brain, even unconsciously. You don't get to choose. Notice, even if you know that, you don't get to choose whether it's doing that or not. It's working on like the monkey brain part of you, right? So one thing you can do is turn your phone to grayscale, and that basically changes the addictive habits. You can also reduce notifications I recommend turning off all notifications except for when a human being wants your attention. In the video, you saw some things where, it says, YouTube, this channel you follow just posted a video. Don't you want to watch it? That notification, we think, was generated based on our choice, that we chose to subscribe to that channel, and they're giving us what we want. But that's not true. They're basically algorithms figuring out I'm calculating what's the perfect thing that'll seduce you. And I know that of the 1,000 channels you follow, this is the one that'll get your attention, and I'll happen to notify you that this new video was just posted. So you have to turn off as many notifications as you possibly can and keep the ones when a human being wants your attention. Right. And that's easy to do.
Like your mother, everybody. Keep
like your mother. Yes, that's a good example. And there's some other stuff too, but the main thing is like how often, you've got this thing up against your skin, right? And the more frequently it buzzes, the more it's conditioning your mind to check it, which is where you get that phantom buzz phenomenon, where if it buzzes a lot and you're expecting it, you don't have it on and you still think like, did my phone just buzz? That whole thing is based on how frequently it's doing it. So if you lived in a world where it's beneath a certain threshold, where it's actually like buzzing very infrequently, right? Or almost, you can imagine a world where you turn it off completely. You'd have a very different relationship to it. And by the way, that's an example of the humane design thing. Just like the blue light, you could say Apple could set defaults that are intelligent and adapt and say, how do we keep that number of notifications down way, 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 way low? Because we know it has this effect on human animals that if you buzz too often, it starts to condition them in that loop. So those are a few sort of small things.
Thank you.
I recommend uninstalling social media in general, by the way.
Do you have?
I would say this is interesting, but Willie, I think you should answer some of these questions. I think it's pretty straightforward. You started seeing billion-dollar businesses. So ultimately, I think business imperatives took over. And by the way, one of the things that Tristan has touched on, Willow's questions have touched on, is business model is everything in terms of how the companies treat you. So there's a total difference between, say, Facebook, Google, Snap, they're all different amongst themselves, Snapchat, Instagram, et cetera, versus, say, a business model like Apple or Salesforce or Microsoft has. So I think what happened was, and by the way, I think that's why we never demonize the individuals involved. I have points of view about all the people who run these companies because I deal with them all, and you get a sense of who they are and what their value systems are and what the impact they're having on their internal culture as well as on the world and how they're going to make ultimate choices. But at the end of the day, I think it's about business and the extraordinary explosion of Silicon Valley as a culture and as the economic engine of the United States, if not the world. And so you follow the money. And it's that's oversimplified, but I do think that is what happened. And I think that, and then it is about, that's why the work that Tristan and his colleagues are doing is so important, because you actually have to change the mindset, not just of the folks in the C-suite, but also the designers and the producers and the engineers in terms of what you're doing. But I think it ultimately was, oh my God, look at this, and look how huge. I mean, look at the 5 largest companies in the world now. What are they? They're almost all Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, and
you also can't. I mean, the business models for sure, but the speed. Like we've never had an accelerated pace of change like what we have just lived through. Wireless communications, the fastest diffusing communication technology, right, in history. And so the rate, the gap between the change and our understanding of it is fairly massive.
Huge,
and we're talking about companies that are toddlers, right, in the scheme of things.
And run by toddlers. Run by toddlers in a sense. No, so they are.
There is a generational aspect to this, in a sense, because people like Mark Zuckerberg are so young, you wonder if older people had developed this technology, whether it might have...
Do it totally different. I'm serious. No, because I don't know what Tristan, libertarian ethos. Look, I'm a Stanford professor, and you can see the kids all, once in a while, they take civil rights and civil liberties so that they can check that box. and tell their friends that they did. But no, I'm kidding. You can watch the change on that campus alone. That is actually a very interesting experience being at Stanford, since it is the home of so much of this, and so many of the young entrepreneurs were in my civil rights class, right? But also were taking BJ's class on art of persuasion there. I just think that there's an element of age and there is a libertarian ethos in parts of Silicon Valley, which is that whatever you should go. What was Mark Zuckerberg's motto? Move fast and break things. Okay, that is a libertarian perspective on the world. Go get it done. You know what? I'm not really responsible for you. I have to do what we do. It's not an evil, demon effort. It's like, I'm going to go, and Willow's so right about the warp speed with which the changes happen. And I wasn't kidding when I said toddlers. And many times, the kids in the engineering classes have the least developed social and emotional skills. They're building huge platforms. No, this is true, though. This is who the people are. And then they sit upon massive empires.
Let Tristan talk.
Just to answer your question specifically, about
defend young people, please. We need a little of that.
No.
Thank you.
I'm inviting you to.
Yeah. So because let's go back in time, because I think you were asking a really good question.
Yeah.
So back in early 2000s, we thought this was all really great. Like, we're opening up access to information. So did we get that wrong? Were we wrong about the things that we were excited about? I would say we weren't actually wrong. There's a few other distinct changes. We have to be really, really clear about what those distinctions were. So the first one, I would say, these are not going to be in order, but one of them is persuasive technology versus neutral technology, or more neutral. Photoshop was not a persuasive technology product. If the people, when you use Photoshop, there wasn't 1,000 designers behind the back of the screen saying, oh, you switched to the hand tool. Now I'm going to tell your friends, here's a notification box that 5 other friends are using the hand tool. And now you're on a streak and you both use the hand tool for as long as you can. Do you know what I'm talking about? So the manipulation bit of using your psychology against you was not part of design back then. These are just web pages. I'm going to put up a page, I'm going to link it to some stuff, and we're going to publish content, and there's a way to read it. So that was fine. The persuasive technology is when there's people updating designs with notifications, with emailing you, and then you add the social component, which is the second thing. So now it's your friend's behavior is now part of your experience. So now social approval, getting back to people, that happening within the internet, that's creating a whole new way in which the internet works. And that totally changed things, was controlling or virtualizing your social life into the screen as opposed to being outside the screen. Because in 2000, that wasn't true. And then the other thing is the intimacy. So the fact that these are actually now, we went from a casual access, I would go to a computer to access the internet in 2000, to computers, to I have 150 times a day mind control in my pocket from the moment I go to bed at night and I set my alarm to the moment I wake up in the morning and I unset my alarm. This thing has me totally jacked in. That is totally new. And then the last thing is AI. So it's not just that they're persuading you with 1,000 engineers. They have like where's the most powerful supercomputers in the world right now? They're inside of 2 companies. Amazon. Well, so yeah, maybe Amazon, but I think actually Google and Facebook, you could argue, have the most data and the most sort of predictive computing, predicting many steps ahead on the chessboard, supercomputers. And instead of pointing the most powerful AI supercomputers in the world at climate change or at solving cancer, we said, oh, I know, for our stock price in the advertising business model, let's point them at human brains. And let's play chess against human minds. So when you land on YouTube, you airdrop a human animal into YouTube. You have activated a supercomputer that's saying, how can I most make you forget the reason why you came here? And play so many moves ahead on the chessboard. You think you're going to be fine. You think, I'm going to land this one video, I'm going to watch this one video, then I'm going to hit close, right? And yet, why is it that you wake up an hour later and you're like, what the hell happened? It's because it knew way more moves ahead on the chessboard, the move it could play, that would perfectly get you to say, well, of course I want to watch that. And that was, we didn't have that in 2000, to your question. So we have AI, you have social intermediation, you have intimacy, the fact that this is in our pockets 24/7 when we wake up and go to bed, and you have persuasive technology, you have the deliberate design of and manipulating human instincts. All 4 of those characteristics are brand new. And I don't think we were wrong in 2000. I think we just added these other things, and we were totally not wise about it.
Great question.
Wow.
I mean, I would say this, and Willow, I think this is something I think Annenberg could be an incredible, interesting leader on with the Ed School at SC. Because, look, we have the second big platform at Common Sense is Common Sense Education, which is as big, you all don't necessarily always know that, because that's our public-facing brand. It's in the majority of schools in the United States, right? Teaching digital literacy and citizenship. But the idea is technology in the classroom is a good thing in terms of personalized learning, adaptive learning, all the different things that can actually improve K through 12 education, particularly in tough, low-income school districts, et cetera. So finding the right balance between using technology and its extraordinary resources for learning and the ways that it can help, we all learn differently. It can individually help kids learn at different rates that are specific to them is amazing. So it's the balance. And the point is, though, you have to have the same humane design concepts.
The point is that there are values embedded, a different set of values embedded, I would assume, in education technology than are embedded in commercially driven.
There should be, but that's the challenge, too, from a design standpoint.
But you're exactly right. I just want to add one thing, though, and I said this in my TED Talk, that it doesn't matter if we build the greatest education apps in the world that the world has ever seen. If it's like a painting where you're distracted by the foreground. We built these great, cool new education tools, but the background of the painting, the background of kids' lives, that lack of security you're talking about, is driven by the fact that if my belonging, like who's gossiping with who and who's dating who and where's the party, if all of that is governed by Snapchat, I have to be on that. And then Snapchat does this thing where it sends messages when your friend starts typing to you. The first character they type, they buzz your phone to let you know, to put you on a hook to keep you anticipating. If that's the background of 100 million, which is the number of people who use Snapchat, by the way, of 100 million teenagers' lives, I don't care. I mean, I love that we're building great educational stuff. The reason we work so hard is that the background of the minds that upon which all choices and other thoughts get made, all learning will happen. The background canvas of kids' minds is being so polluted. We have to fix that first.
I'm going to do one more question, and oh my God, there are 10 hands up, but there's a mic back there. Okay.
I don't know what the latest is with the lab. It's not like there was this big building called the Persuasive Technology Lab. It's just BJ in a room with some students and teaching a class once a quarter. And sometimes he teaches the class, sometimes he doesn't. And I think that you can actually read, he's written quite extensively about the fact that he did talk about the ethics of this in 1997. He presented to the FTC in 2006, warning about the fact that we're going to have persuasive technology. He's not been, naive about some of the long-term impacts. I think the issue is that we haven't been honest enough that we're really decoding the code of ourselves. We're reverse engineering how we work, and that has weird consequences, and we have to protect that, because it's like the atomic bomb code, right? Physicists didn't invent nuclear physics. They just exposed this fact about how nature worked, and what we're doing is exposing facts about how humans work. And the challenge is that that's privileged information. That's very dangerous information, and we have to actually have ways of governing the use of that in ways that are safe. And that's what we're missing, because we actually had this illusion, because our society is built on the idea that the choice is this thing that happens inside of a secure enclave of a mind. It never gets influenced. People are always responsible for everything that they do. And the whole idea of persuasion undermines that. So we have to basically start new standards, new policies, new frameworks to even think about what that is. And that's what I worked on for 4 years at Google.
And that's why you can all change it with us.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you. Jim Steyer, Tristan Harris, thank you both.